Hello, and welcome to another episode of Cybeats Powerhouse Perspectives. My name is Chris Blask. I'm the Vice President of Strategy with Cybeats. I'm here in lovely Miami Beach at the S4 conference that Dale Peterson has been hosting for a number of years, meeting in person with a number of people who've been on this show, friends of Tony and I's, and we're getting together and talking about all these things, which is a hoot. And with us today is Tony Cole, currently CTO of Attivo, an amazing background. Tony, thanks for joining us. Where in the world are you?
Happy to be here, Chris, and I am sitting in Shenandoah Valley in Virginia.
Right, with gorgeous sunsets and so forth. I've been seeing that. You just moved there this year. How long has it been?
It's actually been right at a year now. Love it out here.
Yep.
No, hate it out here. Nobody wants to move out here. It's a terrible place.
Yeah. Well, I lived in the Pacific Northwest in the Skagit Valley once upon a time, where it's miserable and it's rainy and terrible all the time, and I learned that that's another one of those places where locals just say that for that same reason. So
I do wish I was down in Miami. So
right.
I'd love to be at the show, but just couldn't make it down there.
Well, you're always welcome down in the Keys or wherever we move the boats, and so forth. And we're going to be, probably getting together at NASA Kennedy about the ISAC things and so forth. So we get a chance to do all those things. But today we're here to look back, look at the present, look at the future, generally speaking, in supply chains, security and well, this is all going. And as I look at you, you're another one of these people with an amazing background. Anybody our age that's doing this stuff came by some nonlinear path. You started in the U.S. Army, if I understand this, basically creating and running, a cert for the Army in the mid-90s. And have gone from there to, recently being on the NASA Advisory Council. So from the land into the space, right? And however you want to take this, but in the context of situational awareness, pragmatically as a younger guy doing this, putting this together in that high pressure environment, raising this through, advising NASA and doing the professional work you do. What are the lessons learned and what can people do with that?
Yeah, I will tell you, one of the most important things for any young person in this industry is really to look at every conversation you have is not only a learning experience, because everything is a learning experience, regardless of whether you're talking to somebody, who's been in the industry 30 years longer than you, or somebody who came into the industry 3 weeks ago. I learned from everybody. But the important thing is to, take a hard look at it and also look at opportunities. I started out, as you mentioned, in the Army as a cyber operator. And in reality, it was cryptography. And I was fixing large cryptographic systems around the globe and lived everywhere across the globe. And as they changed that industry, I ended up building systems, older systems long before the internet even really existed, where any consumer had access to it. And then as the Army started connecting systems and realized it needed to protect them, I got pulled into the land information warfare activities, Army Computer Emergency Response Team. And that was my first step really into, the full tenet of, if you like that one, CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So, and just had a blast doing that and just immediately knew that's what I wanted to do. So that focus led me to, helping, really get the A cert started, a regional cert started in Korea. And then I got pulled back down after I left Korea back into this area in DC to start the Pentagon cert, and many of the teams there and got to charter the Pentagon cert, which is a tremendous amount of fun and a great learning experience. And I learned from so many people across the board, whether it's on the leadership side, interacting with seniors all the way down to contractors in there who taught me new things about security that I hadn't thought about, and then applying that. So how did that lead me into space? Pretty simple, really. When I retired over 20 years ago from the Army, I decided I didn't want to go to an integrator. I wanted to be different than many military guys when they retire or get out of the service. So I joined a tech company, and that was Recourse Technologies, acquired by Symantec. So I became an executive at Symantec, and then an executive at McAfee, then an executive at FireEye, and then most recently, 4 years ago, I left and went to Attivo Networks because I really liked the deception space and the identity detection and response space that they were playing in. The point is, while I was still at FireEye, NASA reached out to me and had seen me speaking, and a couple individuals there decided that I might be a good fit for, directly in your space, the institutional subcommittee. So looking at many of the ICS and facility devices that were connecting together to be able to control and run securely from a remote location. So I did that for about the better part of a year, and they sunsetted that committee. And NASA liked my input, and we'd like to move you up to the advisory council, so which is like the board for NASA and advises the NASA administrator. So I did that for 3 years until the administration changed, and then left the advisory council back in 2020. But absolutely had a blast doing that. And as you stated, it really was a huge learning experience for me, sitting there at every advisory council meeting, learning from astronauts, from the program managers, about all the different missions they were working on, and then me trying to focus and think about risk management for these systems, supply chain issues for these systems, and how could I provide value back to NASA around these topics. Great learning experience and a tremendous amount of fun. NASA has brilliant, beautiful people there. Brilliant.
Right. You can't say enough about them, and people in our industry is writ large. There's two things you said in that speak to sort of our topic today. One is the whole situational awareness of having a CERT, a cyber emergency readiness team. In that context, in the U.S. Army land warfare. What does that mean? How do I know what's going on? How do I take realistic assets and resources that I can use today? In a high pressure conflict situation. And then you said deception as well, right? And which reminds me, I'd love to get you and Fred Cohen together on that. Fred was one of the early, developers in deception, and there's some interesting exercises that were done in the national labs, that they had to cut short because they didn't want to psychologically damage, the assets, the people who were trying to hack things. Because when you take all situational awareness, away, you end up with hopelessness. I mean, you literally don't know where to start. It's the opposite of Occam's razor. Literally anything's possible. So which one do you do in the time allotted? So we're in this space right now. The supply chain security, right? So software bill of materials, the conversations going on today and yesterday here at S4. Your point about education is so true. Even at this point in my career, I've been at this for a long time, talking with the individuals, sitting down at the table, during the breaks, with, Tim Roxy and Mark Weatherford and, Tim Brown from SolarWinds gave a great talk. Before that, we're talking about things, and he explains how things work. That's critically important. But we're talking about supply chain security right now for a lot of reasons that have developed over the last couple of years only, right? And from your perspective, given that 20 plus years of work across all those organizations, why is it that it's now that supply chain security is important? And what about it is what can people actually do right now? What is the lesson that we can take into our daily lives from the fact that apparently supply chain is important?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting and critically important question right now that everyone at every company should be pondering today, to think about the impact inside their organization if they don't understand supply chain risk. I think that it really got a little bit of light on it back when Target was breached in 2014, and we all know that came through a subcontractor, I think, working on the HVAC system, and the alerts came in, but their security team was overwhelmed with alerts, so they weren't paying attention to the right alerts. Point is that it's changed a lot since then. I think SolarWinds is the additional spotlight on the supply chain issue today that's really waking people up, as well as the shortages that we're all experiencing, for where, there's so many organizations that can't get anything done, because of supply chain issues. I think a really good example of that is Toyota. Earlier this year, I'm sure you heard about that one, had 28 production lines they had to completely shut down. And Toyota didn't do anything wrong. It was one of their suppliers that got breached. And because that supplier was breached, they couldn't get the parts. And it, had a significant impact on Toyota's numbers for production, since they had to shut things down. So I think that when we think about this, the problem is going to get much worse than it is today. When you look at supply chain issues and the global economy that we're in today, we've broken many of those pieces initially from the pandemic and now some of the geopolitical risk that we have around the globe, and it's going to continue it's going to continue to get worse. I mean, we're in a bad spot today, and it's going to get worse. I just tried to go through, and I was going to order a new car, and they told me, it's like, yeah, no, you're going to wait 9 months for that vehicle. It's what we estimate today, because we can't get these parts in a timely manner right now. So these are, that's a first world problem. I can still go get a different car if I wanted, but the point is that, that's one component of supply chain issues that we have. We need to focus on securing them, and we need to focus on this issue. There was a really great blog that was just put out by C Insight, if you haven't seen that one, but they talk about 5 steps, and they pulled it from Accenture, but I think it's really great information. Create a dedicated supply chain risk management program office, step 1. I think that's a great idea. Somebody needs to be focused on this at every large enterprise and every supplier. Get visibility into the whole supply chain. Get an accurate understanding of the threats that the supply chain faces and identify weak points. Determine solutions to identify problems, and maintain and monitor the program. And most enterprises aren't doing that today, and they need to be doing that because, it's a major challenge right now. And I'll pause there. I know that was a lot.
It is a lot. You touched on a key point that's come up a lot today and yesterday and throughout all of this. And I'm always talking about it because it's the economics, right? And I can't say enough about Tim Brown and SolarWinds. The talk he gave today and their response to this is a model. If you're the kind of executive out there that can have access to someone like him, talk to Tim specifically, to learn the lessons from that. He's a CISO in a world where CISO is a high risk job at all. He's a CISO that went through that in the most public fashion and survived. Not only survived, but they strengthened their position and their posture in the company. And all of this, again, looking back through my career, looking back through your career, the things we're talking about right now and then looking out in the future. We are right now, as you said, disturbingly well, in a really complicated position, with a lot of risk going on. And, the inevitability curve of this is that stays that high risk and chaotic forever, or for decades or years or that it doesn't. And maybe it gets worse, maybe it gets better. And which leads us to that looking forward part of things. I am completely aware that we, risk curves always have this opportunity to end up on the bad side. There's a lot of places we need to be really serious and really diligent, from national security, global security, economic security. Don't get me started. But times like this tend to cause evolutionary cruxes and plateaus. So, does this inevitability curve going forward, does it have a trajectory that is bending towards the defenders or away? Not so much from the geopolitical events going on today, but based on the structures we've all been building together for the last, several decades.
Yeah, that's a really tough question, because so many things could happen that could potentially change that curve in one direction or another. I think that the model that we've been building could take it and lean it towards the defenders. But, the geopolitical risk is so high right now that potentially it could upset that apple cart relatively easily. If we manage to cool things down, if we manage to somehow, bring an end to the conflict in Ukraine, and China, potentially pulls back a little bit, and got a little bit more centrist. So instead of, trying to exert their influence across Africa, certainly, Taiwan and many other places, potentially we could be on a good path. But geopolitical risk is the big one for me, when you look at this, because we're building good models now to solve these problems. The point is, can we share it, with enterprises out there and get the attention it needs and get it adopted? I think one of the biggest pieces on this that's not discussed a lot is the fact that when you look at corporate governance now, there's more and more focus on getting the right expertise for cyber systems, for supply chain and such onto boards. And if we're successful in doing that, then hopefully we can have the right emphasis, guidance, and oversight from a board perspective over large enterprises and public companies, as well as private companies, that could help us, fix this problem in most of the civilized world.
Just the sessions and the conversations that I had just today, and there's multiple sessions going on at the same time. I happen to be in certain ones, for non-linear reasons, but they all line up with what we're talking about. right? I'm known for my optimism. I can see very clearly, not only how we get through all of this and have a positive future, but so many other things from, Alan Friedman's here. We have SBOMs now, right? That's a real thing. S4 is not 40 people anymore. It's 800. Really good people who are showing up one after another, presenting sophisticated infrastructures and structures. As you say, we have policies and practices and ways to do this that are pretty good today. Early today, two folks debated, did a formal debate on cyber insurance with a fascinating question. It doesn't become a major impact in the next 3 to 5 years. Because it's one thing to say, well, yes, in the long run, I think cyber insurance will in fact dictate a lot of this at a point in the future.
I agree with you on that.
And I'm obsessed with it. DHS had the CDOG working group earlier. We're at this point right now that the conversation today is just fascinating. And there's good arguments to be made that in the next 3 to 5 years, 36 to 60 months, that becomes a major factor. And there's good arguments to be made against that. We're very much on this bubble. And it seems clear at every level, from in the geopolitical space, and this has been the conversation obviously while we're here as well. Our approach, American approach, or the Western world approach is, post World War II approach is to connect things, create relationships, personal relationships, business relationships. It's hard to go to war with yourself and your family. And everything we do in cybersecurity, information sharing, supply chain security, I see it as a basis and expression of this, freedom, democratic, free speech, let people work things out themselves sort of way with enough structure that, we can execute on it. So I have a lot of hope for it, but it is a very complex time, right? But here today, we're trying to be useful and help people. And I think everything you said, everything I hear here, aside from the concerns, is follow the path we're on. Don't lose faith in process. Don't lose faith in the government. So many former government people are here now. The processes, Chris Krebs became very famous with CISA and so forth. And we have these people who've worked in government, built these processes. They're now in the private sector. We have the ability, the stakeholders, around NASA, I think have benefited an awful lot from this combination, that develops organically based on the kind of transparency that fundamentally we're talking about in supply chain security, even, right? And threat intelligence. How do I enunciate my relationship with you, all the way down, turtles all the way down.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said there, Chris. In fact, it brings to mind, the very mixed collage you have of people who are attending that event who have been in different administrations from different sides of the political aisle. And the vast majority of those people that I know and that I know and are friends with as well, all were in government for one primary reason. It was not to advance a political career. It was to try and solicit change and make things better, in the cyber realm, in national security. So, and those are some of the things that gives me, a great hope for this country, for Western civilization, and for the fact that we can make things better. I mean, there's a lot of people who just want to make things better, and that's why they're engaged, not only from the government side, but from the commercial side, from the industry side. I think one of the challenges that we're going to have to resolve pretty quickly is, how to help security teams and CISOs to really identify and understand, best practices and information out there and get through, and I'm at a vendor, but to get through the vendor FUD. There's so many vendors out there all claiming to have the solution. Oh, I am the perfect answer for zero trust. No, you're not. No one's the perfect answer for zero trust. You can help them maybe on their journey, perhaps, but the point is, how do we get CISOs, where they can very clearly see and articulate the value, from the tools, processes, and expertise they bring in. And I think that's a big area of focus that we need to lean on really hard.
Well, with folks like you and everybody else here, all the people we talk to every Friday, right? That group we get together with, I think it bends towards the defender. I really do. And we can go through some, range we have been through at this point, a range of costs and burdens and so forth, and those ahead of us in the next couple of years. But I think we'll push through it. And I think everything we've done bends in the right direction. But thank you for everything you've done, for joining me here today, and for 2 years of Friday afternoons that make it possible for me to get through the week. So.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you, for having me on the show and for joining every Friday, and always your insightful commentary and questions that you bring, into the discussion each week. So appreciate it, and have a great time at S4.
I am. There's karaoke and hand rolled cigars. I mean, you would love it. Right?
I would love that. So especially the latter. Thanks, everybody.